Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here today on this new presentation about SD-WAN and open source. I am Gregory Cauchie, and over the next 15 minutes, I will address why, in my perspective, should you care about open source in SD-WAN. Please remember that as this session has been previously recorded, I will be available to address and answer any comments or questions you may have. At first, I think it's important to share with you where do I stand and what are the motivations behind this presentation. I am today with Italtel, which is no SD-WAN editor. We are an integrator with a multi-vendor strategy. This means that we have no strings attached with any specific vendor. We do integrate FlexiWAN, who is the only open source SD-WAN solution to our knowledge today. But we do also integrate other SD-WAN solutions, such as many listed into the Gartner Magic Quadrant, but also small vendors that are not listed in this quadrant. So at the end, this presentation is not to sell anything. It is mainly a share of experience of many years of open source and agile DevOps practices and more than 3 years of experience in this SD-WAN business. With that, let's now dive into the core of our agenda. I will begin with the first assessment of how each vendor do address customer requirements today. This is not meant to be an exhaustive assessment, but rather to cover at least some of the major demands on the market. So with that, I start with obviously site connectivity, with for instance VRFs or NAT capabilities. Then also for sure WAN uplinks with a number of tunnels, the type of connectivity, wireless, wireline, V4, V6. And with talking about tunnel quality and SLA monitoring, we talk about keep alive of tunnels or packet-based analysis or even app-based analysis. And talking about app, there's a question about the definitions and the recognition of the app. Is it either manually defined or automatically recognized, or even with automatic updates of the signatures of the applications? Then there is reporting to me with proprietary reporting or data that can be exported through APIs. Then, of course, local breakout with the different flavors of security up to SASE today. Then we can find solution integration, how much different solutions can be found onto public cloud marketplaces or interworking with different third-party solutions. And finally, the friendly usage of a solution also on the UI and also the definition of the configurations. And for some of us, the quality of the REST APIs. So again, this is not meant to be exhaustive. However, from there, we can see how much overlap there are between the different solutions on the market today. And to be GDPR compliant, for sure, data has been obviously been anonymized. So, for instance, solution A covers this part of a spectrum, solution B, this other part, and other solution is covering this part. The conclusion here is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And I tend to think that there will never be, especially if you expect an affordable price out of it. Therefore, customer looking at SD-WAN has to find the vendor which best answers his own set of requirements. So, what role is open source playing today in this SD-WAN field? To answer this question, let's have a look on some of the deployment scenarios. First, the legacy one. In this scenario, hardware and software are provided by the same vendor. Monitoring is performed through the vendor portal API. The pros are you have only one interface to the vendor or one single vendor to interface, and you can just consume all the hardware and software. The downside is that you have a poor customization. You cannot do whatever you want with the solution, or to put it in other words, you are limited to what the vendor is offering you. Also, your evolution is tied to the vendor roadmap. Next, you have what I call the service chaining scenario. In this scenario, you have a universal CPE with an hypervisor taking care of all the bases of the management of the hardware. On top of that, you can find different VMs, two in this example, one dedicated to routing features, another one dedicated to security features. These VMs have to be orchestrated with a VNF orchestrator, and also they are monitored via the vendor APIs. Pros and cons in this scenario are that you can benefit from the best of breed of the solutions on the market, but you have on the other end to orchestrate the VNFs, and also it requires potentially a higher number of resources in the CPE. And finally, you have what I call the open source scenario. In this scenario, you have a white box, which can be compared in a way to the first scenario, but inside of it, all the different software features are composed of different jigsaw puzzle pieces. One can be for SD-WAN routing, another one can be for firewalling, another one for security with IPS IDS security features. Another one can also be a monitoring agent to tie your system to your own monitoring system. This is possible because in open source, the characteristics are that the code is compiled or plainly and simply installed in a system, and it is not requiring a whole operating system to be fixed in. So at the end, you can find a high level of customization. You can manage your SD-WAN as the rest of your IT. And on the downside, you have to take care of the different sources and deal with the different potential possibilities you will face. So to get back to the question of what role is open source playing today in this SD-WAN field, my answer would be that SD-WAN is brought as an application rather than an operating system, which brings two things: modularity at first, and the absence of need for a VNF orchestration. How is this of any interest? Well, my first argument is that you can cherry pick all that you need and only what you need, meaning you can address all your business requirements and, at the same time, set an architecture in line with your operations standards and procedures. Second, it opens the doors for infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code is the practice where systems and services can be easily rebuilt and reproduced. Elements of a system are disposable. Instances of a system are configured consistently. Processes for managing and using systems are repeatable. Routing requests are fulfilled quickly with little effort, preferably through self-service or automatically. And complex changes can be made easily and safely. In short, it brings big parts of a DevOps culture to the network. So another level of software defined can be achieved for the one before the provisioning phase, which is today available. Finally, it brings more latitude on your agenda to add and or activate features and related code at your own pace. I would also add, like in the service chaining scenario, that you can benefit from the hardware and software disaggregation, meaning you can replace part of the software without changing the rest of the software or the hardware, and same goes for the hardware that can be replaced with no need to change the software. So at the end, what's in it for you guys? is to build your own customized software-defined solution at your own agenda. The reaction we usually face and read when talking about open source and networking is that only GAFA companies or service providers can invest in this area. There, I disagree. I think there is no problem for any company of any size to deal with open source in networking, and so in SD-WAN. Why is that? Well, my first argument would be that didn't all of you already run some sort of open source in your IT? But to elaborate a bit more, nowadays, the vast majority of code is in the end generated and maintained by an editor, a vendor, a company. So it's coming with up-to-date documentation. There's potential 24/7 support and task force to fix the bugs. Also, for different kind of projects, you can be wondering how to bootstrap, how to start considering this kind of solutions. My answer would be like any other solutions, integrators like us are here for you. And if you prefer the community, well, open source provides also a community with some Q&A, so you can start on your side, in your own lab, try to figure out how it's working and is it something that really worth the investment. Also, I would invite you to consider the benefits from your training and hiring policy. When I said training, I'm here talking about the amount of time and efforts you would need to enter and to possess and to understand this kind of open source SD-WAN solutions. From our experience, we have found that it's more or less the same as getting into a new SD-WAN solution, which is not open source. You always need to understand the philosophy, get into a new CLI and a new ways of managing the devices. Then, some of you may tell me that managing a Linux on a white box is nothing like managing the routers back in the days. And so getting training to our NetOps would require more efforts and thus more time. And that is true. But consider this. On your path to automation, with tools like Ansible, networking folks will need to understand a bit more of systems and coding. So either you've already taken that path towards automation, and then the remaining gap to fill in is no more than starting into a new CLI, or you didn't started your journey yet towards automation, and in this case, it would be much easier afterwards, since many automation concepts are, in quotes, systems concept. So time-wise, I would sum it up like it is either about the same amount of time, or it is a good investment for automating your infrastructure. Also, I would encourage you to consider the potential benefits of developing skills applicable to both systems and networks. For a scenario like service chaining, it would mean the end of a kind of silo between the system management and the networking management part when a site must be rescued. Also, having profiles with a common set of skills may help evolutions from one position to another easier. It can also improve architectural decisions, and also it can lead the path to the so-called SRE positions, the site reliability engineers. I am now reaching the end of my presentation, so it's time to wrap things up. First, we analyzed that there were no one-size-fits-all solution, so potential customers have two options. First, find which non-open source SD-WAN vendor is best suited for its requirements. Second, tailor his own open source SD-WAN architecture with no compromises in performance. Then, my point was that open source doesn't mean you're alone. You will find the same set of actors, meaning vendors, integrators, support and community anyway. And finally, our experience of open source is that the cost of a turnkey is not really different from non-open source solutions to open source solutions, and that moreover, it is a better path to go for infrastructure as code. So with that, I hope I did bring you some food for thoughts. This presentation will now end, but I remain available for more comments and questions in the Q&A sections. I wish you a good summit, take care, and hopefully see you next year in live. Bye-bye.